until the bell goes off. Answer on this one should be 5. If you're finding the x-intercept, you put a 0 in for y. And that's a negative sign there. Move this to the left side, make it a positive. Half x equals 8. 1/2 of something equals 8 is not 4. You are not multiplying a half by 8. You are dividing 8 by 1/2. The answer should be 16. You must read the directions. It is asking for the y-intercept, not the x-intercept. Answer is -3. It's already in slope-intercept form. This is the x-intercept, so you're going to have to put a 0 in for y. And then move this to the left-hand side. -12 divided by 2 is -6. We have 16 out of 20, which is 80%. The winning numbers are 3, 4, 8, 12, and 16. Here's a multiple choice before we get the homework answers. To find the x-intercept, you have to put a 0 in for y, and when you do that, you have to move the x term to the left and make it a positive 2/3 x. And then divide 12 by 2/3. That's the same as 12 over 1 times 3 over 2. That is 18. Here are the homework answers. For the problems, the main problem was not reading the directions. On the paper that you received, it said, graph the 4 lines. And I had many people putting points down on the graph. This is y equals 5, y equals -4, x equals 6, and x equals -2. Lines, we've graphed those. Horizontal, vertical, we did that. If the directions tell you they are lines, and you put points down and come up with a diamond figure or something like that, then you need to start paying attention to the directions more closely so that you can troubleshoot your own work. But when you graph these 4 lines, you end up with a box in here, and it's 8 that way and 9 this way. Area of a box is length times width. This one is 72. This one turned out to be 180. This one is 132. And this one is 42. The A and A+ tests from Friday. First period, Nick Dame and Johnson with an A+. And Ruark had an 1100, and she had a high score out of all the classes. The average score for first period was 632. For fourth period, Carver and Johnson had A+. Carver had the high score for fourth period. He was tied with someone else. Carver was tied with Malone with a 1067, and Hamilton also had an A. And Clark had an A+. Fourth period's average was 629. Fifth period, Perry and Hammond, A+. Hammond had an 1100, perfect paper, high score of all classes. And Baldridge and Spradlin both had A+. Armstrong and Blizzard each had an A. And the average for fifth period was 717. The average would be higher even with all those A+, but we have folks who get like 110, 20 out of 1,000, so it does drag it down a little bit. Test review. Today's objective, it's still the same except we're going to almost start over, but we're going to start over with two variable equations, and you don't have to create these yet. They're given to you to start with. Here's a review that will help you out tremendously in doing these problems. If you understand the review, it's going to make the beginning of these problems so much easier. At some point in each of these problems, you're going to have to look at the first two numbers out on the left-hand side of the equations. And you have to determine what is the lowest positive number that both numbers will go into evenly. So when you see negative 1 and 4, don't think about a negative sign yet. Just think 1 and 4. What is the lowest number that both 1 and 4 will divide into evenly? 4 does not divide into 1 evenly. Nope, 8's not the lowest one. 4 does not divide into 2 evenly. 4 is it. So now what do I have to multiply negative 1 by to get a positive 4? Negative 4. What do I multiply 4 by to get a positive 4? 1. 2 and 3. What's the lowest number that 2 and 3 will go into? What do I multiply 2 by?
3.
And 3? 2. Negative 3 and 5. Don't worry about the negative sign, just think 3 and 5. What's the lowest number that 3 and 5 will divide into evenly?
15.
15. What do I multiply negative 3 by to get a positive 15? Negative 5, and what about the 5? 3. Negative 6, negative 2. Don't worry about the signs, just think 6 and 2. What's the lowest number that both 6 and 2 go into? 6. The question's over with now. And multiply this by what to get this? Negative 1. And this? Negative 3. 5 and negative 2. Forget about the signs. What's the lowest number they will both go into? 10. What do I multiply 5 by? 2. And negative 2? Negative 5. Negative 1 and 2. What's the lowest number? 2. So what about the first one? Negative 2, and the second one? 1. 4, yes. So what are my numbers? 1 and 1. Negative 6, negative 2. 6. What are the numbers? Negative 1 and negative 3. What is it? 8. What about the first number? And the second? Negative 1. Lowest one. First number? 1 and 5. Here's the first example. You have two equations, and they're both in standard form. You're going to have to solve for x and y using both equations together. The first step of this problem is exactly like the review we just did. Look at your x numbers. What is the lowest number that 8 and 9 will go into evenly?
36.
It's not 8 and it's not 36. $72 is right. So 72 is that number. So now you have to think, what do I multiply 8 by to get 72? 9. You're going to multiply everything in the top one by 9 because that's what you have to multiply 8 by to get 72. And then on the bottom one, what do I multiply 9 by to get 72? 8. So I multiply everything in the second equation by 8. So now go through the top equation and multiply everything by 9. And when you do that, you get 72x plus 27y equals a negative 936. Now on the bottom equation, you multiply everything by 8 to get 72x minus 16y and then minus, I believe that's 592, is that right? Negative 592? Yeah, negative 592. So you've changed both of your equations. The purpose of getting two numbers that are identical in the spot next to the x's, which is the coefficient, is so that when you get to this spot here, you can subtract. And when I subtract, what happens to 72x minus 72x? 0. So they cancel out, and that's what we want. So then you have to follow the operations. So you have 27 minus a negative 16. You have to follow the signs. 27 minus a negative 16 is what? 43. So that's 43y. And what is a negative 936 minus a negative 592? If anybody said it, I can't hear it. Negative 344. So y equals a negative 344 over 43 to solve for y. So what is y? Negative 8. So you have one of your answers. To get the answer for x, you have to plug the y value back in, and you have a choice. You can use this equation, or you can use this one. It makes no difference which, as long as it's one of these two. I'm going to use the bottom one here. So I'm going to go to the right here and make some room. 9x minus 2 times y, but instead of writing y, I'm going to put what in? Negative 8. And that's equal to negative 74. So minus 2 times negative 8 is going to be plus 16. And I move that 16 to the right and make it minus. So negative 74 minus 16 is a negative 90. Negative 90 over 9 gives me an answer of negative 10. You will not write your answers as x equals negative 10 or y equals negative 8. Your final answer is a point, and it's in xy form. So your final answer is negative 10, comma, negative 8. Here's the whole purpose of this. Notice that our final answer was expressed as a point. So here's a very badly drawn x and y coordinate plane. And let's say I have two lines. One goes here and one goes there. They cross at this point. That point is the solution to the system of equations. So if you were to graph the two lines we just did, they would cross at a point, and if you drew your graph accurately enough, you can get the answer to the system by graphing. That's why we express the answer as a point, xy, because it is a point on the graph. It's the intersection point of two lines of what we're solving for. Here's example 2. Your two numbers out here are negative 9 and 6. Forget about the negative sign. What's the lowest number that 9 and 6 will go into? Is what? 18, yes. So what do I have to multiply negative 9 by to get a positive 18? Negative 2, right. And what do I multiply 6 by to get 18? 3. So do those multiplications. On the top, you're multiplying by negative 2. So you should come up with 18x minus 2y equals 140. And on the bottom equation, when you multiply through by 3, you should get 18x minus 21y equals 102. Once we have two positive 18x's, then we can subtract the two equations. So these would cancel out, and that's what we want. So now you go to the y's. Negative 2y minus a negative 21y is what? Positive 19y. And 140 minus 102 is what? 38. So you divide y, or not y, but 38 by 19 to get an answer of 2. Y would equal 2. And once you have that 2, you can plug it back in to this one or this one. So it would go here or there. I'm going to choose the top one. So I'll lower this down and go to here. And on the top equation, it's negative 9x plus y, but instead of y, I'm going to use 2. So I move that plus 2 to the right, change the sign, and then divide by negative 9. And I'll get an answer of 8. Our final answer is going to be written as the x value first, comma, y value. What's the lowest number? 12, yes, it is 12, and I need a black marker. There we go. So what's the first number? And the second? Lowest number? 24, so what's the first one? Negative 8 and 3. Lowest number? 5. And what about the first one? 1 and negative 5. Yeah.